I'm Layne, Caterpillar's North American Waste Application Specialist. And today we're going to talk about our daily walk-around inspection. And we're going to talk about why do we do the inspection? Where do we start? What is the proper procedure for doing our walk-around inspections? So why do we do a walk-around inspection? Well, number one, safety. I want to catch a problem, say maybe it's a hydraulic line that's rubbing, potentially a little bit of leak. I want to catch that before it becomes a safety issue. Or if it's a brake issue, I want to catch that in that walk-around inspection before I go to work. The second reason why we do our daily inspections are to increase machine life and performance and get the maximum performance out of that machine. So once again, I want to catch a problem when it's small, get it fixed before it becomes a major issue. So let's talk about where do we start our walk-around inspection? Well, I really don't care where you start your walk-around inspection, but overall, the first thing I want to do is I want to analyze the area, inspect it for any potential safety hazards as I walk up to that machine. I'm going to walk up, I'm going to pull that disconnect key out. I call that claiming my machine, right? So now I've got the disconnect key, so nobody can get in that machine and turn it on if I'm on the other side conducting my walk-around inspection. So that's to get started. Now, where do I start? Well, it doesn't matter. The only thing I ask is that you do it in the same place every time. I myself, I'm left-handed. So I like to always start on the left front of the machine. That makes it a routine for me. And I ensure that I'm going to check every critical component of that machine during that walk-around inspection and not miss anything. So that's how I conduct my walk-around inspection. Now, the other thing that I'll add is all your companies are going to have their own walk-around inspection form for you to fill out and report any damage or any safety issues. If you don't have one, on the Caterpillar website, www.cat.com/safety, we have walk-around inspection forms that you can download for free and use that to conduct your walk-around inspection. But the main thing with that is, if there's any damage or any safety issues, write it down, report it, and report it again until it gets fixed. Okay? And with that, let's get started on our daily inspection. So as we start the walk-around inspection in here, the first thing I'm looking at, I come in between the wheel and the blade, and this gives me direct access to see across at an angle where I can look at my lift arms. I can look at my pin keepers inside, make sure those are tight and in place. I can also see if I've got any fluid or anything leaking from my dual cone seals on the left side wheel on this compactor. As I start to come out, I'm going to look and make sure my differential locks are in place and protected. And then another thing I'm looking at as well is the condition of my lift cylinder. I want to look at the chrome. I want to make sure there's no pitting, there's no gouges, there's no scratches on there that are going to allow for damage on there. Before I come out, I like to make sure I got a rag with me, and I like to wipe this dust boot off as that dirt builds up on that seal. And eventually, if we don't clean that, it'll start pulling some of that dust inside into the hydraulic system and eventually contaminate it. But you can see just one wipe on that seal, how dirty that was. Okay, now we're going to turn around and check the front. I'll look at the bottom of my lift cylinder, make sure all the bolts and nuts are tight and there's no damage. And then I'm going to look at the back part of my blade as I work my way out. And some of the things I'm looking for are I'm going to look at the welds. I'm going to make sure there's no cracked welds. Some of the ways that I can tell if I got a crack in the weld is if I see rust on that weld. It's a good indication I'm getting some moisture in there. So those are some of the things that I'm looking for as I work my way out and check the back of the blade. Okay, now as I've looked at my tips and I worked my way out, now what I'm going to look for on my wheels is I'm going to check the condition of the wheels here. I want to look at the welds all the way around the wheel on the outside here, and also we're welded on the inside. So I'm going to look to make sure I don't have any cracks in that weld system. And then also I'm going to look at my lug nuts that hold the wheel on, and also I'm going to look at my drain plug and make sure I don't have any leaks coming out of that vinyl as well. But some of the things I'm looking for on the lug nuts, so I don't have to reach in here and grab each one of them. If I see debris built up around those lug nuts and I got one that doesn't have any debris, good indication that maybe it's loose, it's moving around, it's not allowing that debris to build up. Also, if I see rust streaks or I see something shiny on those lug nuts, is a good indication that something's loose there. So that's what's going to draw my attention to it. I'll step back, once again looking at my welds on this side and on the inside here to make sure I don't have any cracked welds on my wheel. We're going to work our way in. We're going to check the condition of our tips as I work my way in. I'm also going to look at my hard face weld on the outside of the wheel right here too as I come in. So I'm checking the welds, I'm checking the tips, make sure I don't have any broken welds. I'm gonna look at my striker bar and anything here, make sure none of these bolts are loose as I start to work my way in to this section here. Okay, now as we work our way in to the inside of the machine here, a couple things I want to point out that's part of this inspection and safety inspection is number one, my steps, okay? These steps here are rigid, so that allows me better traction as I climb up on the machine here. It's also a thicker steel because with waste being very abrasive, it'll wear that steel down. So we've got thicker steel, we've got the rigid point here that gives me good traction as I work up. But now as I want to climb up, and where I got my fuel cap up, or my fuel tank up top, I've got hydraulic lines up there that I want to kind of look at. So I've got a lot of debris built up, and this is very common in the environment that we're in, right? So I need to clean this out, knock this stuff down so I can get up and get my foot up on the top step, which is once again, as I can see here, very rigid, allows for good traction as I climb up. And then I'm gonna grab onto my handhelds. Another thing with these handhelds here is it's not a hollow tube, it's a solid steel tube that's on here and bolted on. So I always wanna make sure the bolts are tight, there's no damage to them. So that way when I do gotta climb up and fill my machine, that I've got good access and it's safe for me to climb up and fuel this machine. Another thing we need to look at as we continue on is I want to be able to stand here and be able to look inside between the wheel and the frame of the machine. So I can look in, see if there's any debris, any wire, anything that might be wrapped up around the dual cone seals inside of my wheels. As I come back, I want to always check and make sure my safety stickers are in place. This is telling me that I've got a pinch hazard. A lot of times these aren't going to last over the life of the machine, okay? But it's always good to be aware of the warnings and know what kind of warnings are there in those particular areas that could cause injury to me as the operator. Okay, also, I'm going to look down and make sure this is clean in place, and then I'm going to look at my steering cylinders. Now on this machine, these steering cylinders are in reverse. And the reason why that is just to protect that machine as it turns. But I want to once again look at the cylinder for any pitting, gouging, any cracks. And then also I want to look for debris inside here. As I look, I've got debris built up inside. What will happen if I don't keep this clean is every time that cylinder comes in and out and I got a lot of debris built up, that debris, that waste will wear down this cylinder and cause damage to the steering cylinder, okay? So I want to make sure that's clean. I'm now going to come in and look in the center here. And one of the main things I want to look at here in the center is number one, my steering stops. So I've got the plunger right here, and I've got this that's going to come in. This is what's going to stop that machine turning. So if anything gets in here and bends these to where they can't make contact, this machine will still continue to turn. I could blow out a steering cylinder if that's damaged and not making contact. So I want to make sure that it's free and clear and no damage to it. I also want to look at my drive shaft, and I want to make sure I don't have any debris or waste built around the drive shaft. As you can see, trash gets everywhere on this machine. If I have a lot of it built up and that drive shaft continues to spin, it's eventually going to wear that steel down and cause damage to that drive shaft. Last thing I want to look at inside here is these upper and lower articulation joints. And the main thing there is going to be just to make sure I keep the debris cleaned out from around it, so that way I'm not been putting extra maintenance on that machine because I'm wearing the steel down from leaving all that debris built up as it moves in and out. Okay, now as I've checked everything out in the middle here, right, the common theme, as you can tell, is always still we want to clean up the debris around any of the moving parts on the machine because that creates friction, which is therefore going to increase my maintenance costs and cause damage to the machine. So I want to always keep that clean as well. And also I'm looking up at my hoses all the time as well too, looking for leaks. So I look at my hose bank here, and then I can come over here and turn the other way and follow those hoses where they go in underneath the cab and look where they make connections and make sure I don't have any leaks. And as I look at these hoses, now, one thing that's kind of draw my attention to it right now is this spot right here. I can tell from all the dust that's on the hoses now, I can tell that it's been rubbing right there. So that's an area that I want to keep my eye on as I do my inspections every day. Now, those hoses are wrapped for extra protection. However, eventually that might wear through. So this is definitely an area of concern that I'm gonna have to keep an eye on while I do those daily inspections every day and make sure this machine's operational and ready to go. Now, as I work my way out and look, the next thing I want to check is my transmission sight glass, and it's located right here. Now, it is fully encased inside the steel to protect it from the waste and the debris. It's also got a solid steel sliding door here too to protect it. So I'm going to lift that up. That allows me direct sight in to look at it. But another thing too is when I look at it, when the transmission's hot, it's also got a little notch cut into the frame or into the steel, and that is going to be my transmission check. So the fluid's got to be at that little notch that's actually cut in there. So now, with the waste being as abrasive as it is, I don't have to worry about having a sticker there that tells me where my safe levels are. I've got it cut into the steel frame, and that way it's never going to get torn off, and I'm never going to have any question of where my hot oil check is. Okay, now we want to look up top at our cabin and look at the guarding, but I also want to look and make sure all my bolts are tight for my handrails. Once again, safety feature. It's going to keep the operator safe as I get up on that machine, so I need to make sure the bolts are tight. They're not damaged. I'm going to look for any damage along in the where it's welded as I work my way out. Then I'm going to come in and look on the inside here as well for any loose bolts, anything on the handrails there. And then also I want to pay attention. I also have a dog bone. Sometimes it's on the machine, sometimes in the maintenance shop, but it's a red articulation joint lock, and that will be stationed here. And then it fits in to these two spots right here. And that'll be used for transport from safety, or if the mechanic's got to get inside there and perform any service while the machine's running, we can put that articulation lock in place, and that'll keep that machine from doing any articulation. But that's right here, and we want to always make sure that that's secure if I do have that on the machine. Okay, now I looked up top. Now I want to come inside. Okay, I'm going to open up this panel. Inside this panel here is, number one, you'll notice we've got our disconnect switch. Okay, and you'll notice it doesn't have the key in there. I removed that key before I started the walk-around inspection, so that way I don't have to worry about somebody getting into that machine and starting that machine up while I'm over on the other side possibly doing the inspection. So I'm always going to take that disconnect key out. I'll keep that with me until my inspection is over. But a couple of things inside this panel is I've got my jump receptacle. If I got to jump start the machine, simply just pull that cover off, cables plug right in, okay? I want to make sure that that cover is always there in place. Also, I've got a breaker right here. I like to get in the habit of every so often pushing that breaker in because of the dusty environment that we're in every day. Eventually that dust builds up around there, and it might not allow that breaker to be able to be reset in case I need it. So every couple days, just kind of push that in, make sure the dust doesn't build up too much. And then also I've got this round light right here, this amber light. It's an amber colored light. This is what we call our wait to disconnect light. So basically with our tier 4 system, it has DEF. When that machine shuts down for the day, I'm purging the DEF out of the lines back into the tank. So when that light is illuminated, that means that I'm in the purge cycle and I cannot shut the disconnect off, because if I shut the disconnect off, it will stop the purge and therefore leave DEF inside of the lines. And DEF it's number one, it's corrosive. Number two, it freezes. So we want to make sure we always allow that to do its purge and DEF out of the lines at the end of the day. Now I want to keep looking. Any spot where I've got a bolt or weld is always going to be an area that I want to look at. I want to make sure the bolts are tight. I want to look at the welds on the frame here, make sure I don't have any cracks. Work my way over to the wheel, and once again, just like the other wheel, I'm looking at my welding on the outside of the wheel. I'm looking at my welding on the inside of the wheel. I'm going to come across. I'm going to look at all the lug nuts. Once again, make sure I don't have a loose lug nut, and work my way to the back here. The whole time I'm doing this as well, from safety, I do got to pay attention to where I'm stepping. Once again, very uneven terrain, soft underfoot with the trash. So I want to make sure I'm looking where I step too, so I don't trip and fall and injure myself during the walk around. Now, as I come around, I can look at the back side of the wheel and look at my tips, make sure there are no cracked welds, the tips are good. I'm going to look at the striker bar, make sure all the welds are good. Anywhere where I've got bolts, I need to make sure the bolts are tight and not loose. Also, when I'm standing here, I can look up and make sure my bolts, as I come across, make sure the bolts on my handrails up top are tight and in place. Also my step, I want to make sure my step is free of debris. Once again, this is a thicker steel. It's got the rigid tops, so it gives me good traction. And then I've got the solid handbars to hold on to when I climb up using 3 points of contact. Another thing we really need to look at as well here is make sure all this debris and stuff is out of the way. So when I do mount the machine, utilizing 3 points of contact, you know, I've got a solid base to step on. I've got a wider platform here. It's got a star punch on the platform to give me good traction when I do step up on it. But I got to make sure that's free and clear of debris, because when we talk about mounting and dismounting the machine, we have found, the insurance industries have found 75% of all injuries to an operator on a job site are simply from mounting and dismounting the machine incorrectly. And then when we factor in the waste and the environment that we're in here, you know, it could be slippery, a lot of debris built up. It adds to that about getting injured on the job site when I mount and dismount that machine. So I want to make sure everything's free and clear and clean as I mount that machine. Next, we want to come in, we want to open up this door. We want to look inside. Couple of things going on inside this compartment here. So these are going to be switches here and the lock in place. So I can flip the switch. If I need electrical power, if my mechanic needs electrical power to the machine, he can flip the switch, lock it. So it's going to keep the engine from cranking, but it's still going to allow me to have electrical power. The other part is, if I need the engine running, but I want to be climbing around that, I can flip this switch and lock out my transmission. So I put that in place, it'll keep the transmission from engaging. I got an emergency shutoff switch. So from a safety standpoint, if I see a fire on this machine or I'm on the outside, I got fluids pouring out of it or I got to shut it off, I can flip that switch up, flip that switch, and therefore it's going to kill the fuel and shut that engine down. Another thing we have here is this other switch is outdoor lighting. So I've got light inside the engine compartment and on the steps. So if it's dark out and I'm going to mount this machine, from a safety standpoint, I can turn the lights on. Now I can see as I go up the platform in the dark. Okay, now let's talk about this right here. This is our DEF tank. Okay, now I want to open this up. I've got the sticker here that tells me that it's DEF. Now when I open this up and look inside, I've got the blue cap. The thing about DEF is it's very easily contaminated. Okay, so I got to be very careful as I fill my DEF to make sure I don't contaminate the system. Now this is size proportion to the size of a diesel tank. So therefore I got a gauge inside the cab that tells me how much I have. But the one thing to keep in mind is the more I open this, the more risk I run to contaminate that system that's going to cause problems to my CAT emissions module or Tier 4. So one thing we want to do is make sure I've always got that rag with me just as we keep our dust boot clean on our hydraulic cylinders. But also I want to make sure I just wipe everything down, open the cap, fill it up, and then get the cap back on without getting it dirty. Close the lid, put the keeper on. Okay, next I want to come over here and I want to get into my radiator compartment and look for any debris that's inside the radiator. So first step is I'm going to open up the trash rack. And we're going to swing it over here. And now I've got a safety bar right here. It's going to clip into place. Just like that. That's going to hold it in place so it doesn't swing back and hit me as I'm trying to look into my radiator. So next, I'm going to mount the machine using 3 points of contact. I'm going to come up top. We're going to open up this. Now, I've got two red handles here. Okay, so looking inside, make sure I don't have any debris built up in the radiator. Make sure the compartment down below is clear and free of any debris. Also, this gives me a great opportunity, once again, to take my handy dandy rag and wipe off my camera. So that way, for my rear camera, from a safety standpoint, that's going to allow me to see behind the machine. I want to keep that clean as well. Everything looks good. Now we're going to close it up. Yeah, I forgot that. Now you can see that's pretty heavy. As soon as I pulled that safety latch up, the rack started moving out. So the safety feature there to hold that in place, very good. And now I want to take my clip there, put it in place. Okay, now we're at the back of the machine. And at this point, this is where I'm going to look at the outside of my trash rack, number one. I'm going to look for any damage on that, right? Mainly the welds on each one of these bars going across, okay? I want to make sure those welds aren't cracked. I also have a flange underneath here to keep any trash or debris from getting up underneath and in behind, between the radiator and this trash rack. So I've got welds going across. I want to check those as well, make sure there's no cracks in those welds and there's no damage. The other thing I'm looking for back here is, you notice I'm squatted down low. I can look under the machine, and this is where I want to look to see if I got any fluids leaking, as well as I'm looking at my wheels, all four wheels that I can see if I got any fluid coming out of those dual cone seals. So as long as I don't see any fluids or any fluids on the ground or on the wheels, we're good to go. And that's another thing that draws my attention to from an operator standpoint when I'm doing that walk around. If I see dust built up around one section, because if I've got a leak, that dust is going to accumulate there and it's going to be in that one spot. So that's going to draw my attention to, that I've got a possible leak in that area. But I'm mainly looking under the machine, and then also just want to make sure my toe pin is clean and free of any debris as well. Now we're going to come around. We're going to finish our inspection on the other side. Some of the things that I'm looking for here is, once again, my platform. We got the star punch. It gives me good traction when I'm on the platform. I want to make sure that's clean and clear of debris. Handhelds, again, make sure the bolts are tight. They're all in place. Steps are clear. That way I got easy access onto the machine without slipping and falling. I want to make sure and remove anything that could possibly be in my way that's going to hinder me getting on and off that machine safely. I'm looking for tight bolts, make sure everything's in place. Same thing I did on the wheels on the other side, right? I'm going to look at my tips. I'm going to look at the wheel or the welds, make sure I don't have any cracks. I'm going to look at my weld on the inside of the wheel, as well as here. I'm going to look at my lug nuts, make sure they're all tight. Also going to, once again, look at that drain plug. Make sure I don't have anything leaking out of that drain plug as well. I work my way over as I'm looking at everything. Look at the back side of the wheel, looking at my tips, welds. Once again, on my striker bars, make sure all the bolts are in place and tight. Okay, now we want to check out our hydraulic service center. This is our hydraulic service center. Inside of here is my hydraulic sight gauge. So I'm going to look in, see what it tells me. Oh, it's a little hard to read, right? So, because of all the dust that's built up on it. So once again, I've got my handy dandy rag. I'm going to put it inside there, and I'm going to rub up and down on that glass. Okay, now I can see. So I've got the check in there. It tells me where the hydraulic level is. I can see it. Good to go. Okay, so now we want to check that. Here's my hydraulic fill. Here's the tank inside here, once again, and then also the lid up top here. This bolts here, when I need to fill hydraulic, folds forward. That way I can get up in there and fill the hydraulic tank. Now, continuing on with our inspection, I'm going to look, as I'm in the middle here, I'm going to look at my bolts once again on my handrails, make sure they're all tight and they're in place. Now I'm going to look inside the middle here on this side of it. Some of the things, once again, I'm looking at. The upper and lower articulation joints. Want to make sure those are clean and free of debris. Also, I'm going to look at these steering stops on this side. Make sure I don't have any damage to these steering stops and to where it'll allow that machine to stop, when I'm turning, when it hits that plunger there and stops. Also, this side of the drive shaft. Once again, I can see from this side of it, I've got my Zerk on the drive shaft for a grease point. Okay, I want to make sure I've always got clean and free of debris so I can get in there and grease that drive shaft. And now we want to look at that steering cylinder again, right? So I'm going to take my rag again. As I'm looking in, I see I got a lot of debris here. I want to make sure I've got that cleaned out from the debris. Also, I want to get inside there, just wipe off that dust boot again so I don't allow that dust to go into that hydraulic system and start contaminating that hydraulic system as well, okay? I want to look on this end of the steering cylinder, make sure my pin keepers are in place, the bolts are tight, and that's there. Another thing that I really need to pay attention to on this side is right behind this steering cylinder is a little oval cut in the steel, and there's 2 grease zerks there. Those grease zerks are for the rear oscillation bearings. Very easily overlooked. Want to make sure that we're greasing those per the OMM and how many hours it tells me to grease that, okay? Now I'm going to look at all that, work my way out. This is where I can see up again, once again on the cab and the cab guard, the window guard. Make sure all the bolts are tight. I'm not missing any bolts and that everything's in place. Okay, now I'm going to step back and I'm going to point up top there, that square, that little round square switch there is our dead engine lowering switch. Okay, so if the blade were to be up in the air, the engine died, I can climb up there, turn that, and lower that blade, okay? Also, now as I start to work my way out, I want to make sure my handrails are good and tight in place. I want to make sure my steps, once again, are free of debris. So as we can see everything building up, I want to keep that clear. I'm going to look at the back part of my wheel and my tips as I work my way out. Okay, now we're going to look at same thing we did with the other 3 wheels on the machine, right? Once again, I'm looking at the tips. I'm looking at the hard face weld. I'm looking at the weld around the outside of the wheel. I'm looking at the weld on the inside. Make sure I don't have any cracks. I'm looking at the lug nuts. I'm making sure they all look the same. They're all tight. You know, once again, if I got one that looks different than the other, doesn't have any debris, it's going to draw my attention to it that, hey, something's going on with that. Or I've got rust streaks, or I got something shiny. Also, I'm going to look, make sure on my drain plug, I don't have anything leaking out around there. So basically making sure everything's in place. Look at it as I walk over here. Now, I'm going to come inside. I'm going to look at the tips on this side of the wheel. Once again, looking at those welds. This now allows me the opportunity to look at my other lift arm across from, you remember when we started the walk around, I was able to see that way. Now this allows me to see the inside of that lift arm from this direction. Make sure the pin keepers are in place. I'm going to look at my differential and my plugs, make sure that they're tight and I don't have any leaks coming out of there. And then I'm going to look at my lift cylinder on this side of it and make sure I don't have any damage or any debris built up and keeping that clean. And then I'm going to turn around, look at the back side of my blade. I'm going to look at everything here, make sure I don't have any damage to the rack, as well as on the back side, make sure I don't have any cracked welds. That's mainly what I'm looking for back here on the blade. And then I'm going to work my way out. Okay, coming out, right here is where I can stop, look up top at my window, anything on the cab, make sure everything's in good working order. Now I'm going to come around to the front of the blade. And at the front of the blade, some of the things I'm going to check out are, I want to make sure all the bars for my trash rack are in place. They're not damaged. All the welds are good. I don't have a broken weld. I don't have a cracked weld. So another thing I'm going to look at is my cutting edge. I want to look at all the bolts across the cutting edge, make sure they're good and tight. Once again, another good indicator that's going to draw my attention is if I got debris built up around all those bolts and I got one that doesn't have anything around it, it's a good indication that it's loose. It's moving around. It's not allowing anything to build up. So I'm going to look at all those across the whole cutting edge. Once again, all my rack going this way, all the way to the end of the blade. Make sure there's nothing broke, no cracked welds is the main thing that I'm looking for, any structural damage. You know, another thing too, when I look at the blade or anything else around that machine, if I see any cracked paint and it's kind of spider webbed or got some cracked paint, that's always a good indication there's possibly some structural damage that maybe happened and it cracked that paint a little bit. So I want to keep my eye on that as well. Okay, so now we've completed our ground level inspection. So now I've come up on top, I walked around, I turned my disconnect switch on. So I've got power to the machine, it's ready to start. Now we're gonna come down the steps and I wanna start talking about the engine compartment. So here I wanna loosen this up, open it up. This is where I can take an air wand and put in there and blow out the radiator and any debris that might be on the inside. Very easy to get to, very easy to open. Next, I'm going to talk about my screen right here. I want to make sure we keep this clean, okay? This has got positive pressure inside the engine compartment to keep that air clean as it's going to circulate through that engine compartment. But we want to definitely focus on keeping that clean and knocking anything off that builds up inside there. I can open the door. I've got a lot of room to reach inside if there is any debris on the inside. I want to make sure I pull that debris out. I want to get it off of the radiator. But this screen is designed to be the same as anything that can get through this screen is going to get through the radiator at the same time. But we definitely want to make sure we're looking inside, keeping debris out of the radiator compartment. Next, we're going to move up a couple of steps, and we're going to open up this compartment. Inside here, this is going to be our engine oil check. So right inside here is my engine oil dipstick. Now, a couple things to think about. It's yellow, so it's color coded. Yellow always means engine oil with our equipment. But I want to check the dipstick. I want to make sure I wipe it off, put it back in. Pull it back out and check, because I want to wipe that engine oil off, because if I don't, I could get a false reading. So I want to make sure I keep that clean. We're going to put that back in. I got the engine fill, and then we also have a quick evac system. So I can hook the hose up to that. I can suck that engine oil out, and that's going to help reduce possible contamination of the system. I've got my filters inside there. So a couple things to really look at. The main thing I'm looking at is I want to keep the engine compartment free of debris. Anything, trash can get anywhere. That's where the main culprit of fires is the debris getting inside the engine compartment, getting on that heat source, and becoming an ignition source for the fire. A lot of the heat things inside, like our cat emissions module with the tier 4 or the turbo, have a heat wrap that goes around them to protect them, so that way to help reduce the fires. But we definitely still want to go through and remove any of that debris from the engine compartment. And that's something also will take place on our post-trip inspection. At the end of the day, when we shut down, we want to do that walk around, make sure I remove any of that debris, because we find about 60% of all fires happen after hours. And that's simply just because we didn't remove the debris from the heat source, and everybody went home for the day, and next thing you know, we got a fire. So we'll shut that compartment. The next compartment up top here is where our air filter is. And we went back, we got the round design. So I got 4 clips. I can undo the clips, pull the air filter out, get rid of it, put the new one in. Very easy, quick and easy to change. Some of the things I'll point out though, how I know that's the air filter, is I've got a picture of the engine block. I've got a big arrow that shows air going in, and I've got a dashed line below it that represents filter. So that tells me it's engine air filter. Okay, up top, let's talk about this sticker right here that's in place. Okay, so first of all, anything I want to know about this machine, grease points, service points, fluid checks, and I got a question about anything I want to know, I can get it out of the OMM. But we also have it right here on this sticker. And what this sticker is telling me is it's got a line that's going to tell me the hours, okay? It's got the point where it's pointing on the machine where those service points are, whether it's a grease jerk, whether it's a fluid check. It's coming back and it's telling me what it is and how many hours that I need to service that. So whether it's a grease point, it's going to tell me how many hours. It's got my daily grease points. It's got my weekly grease points. But every service point on that machine is right here on this sticker. Okay, now the last thing I want to check before it's fluid-wise, time to get in the cab and go to work, is my coolant level. And right here is the sight gauge for my coolant level. And as long as I've got coolant inside that sight glass, we're good to go. Also up top, here's our coolant fill. Pull that lid up. There's the cap to fill our coolant. And then the other thing we want to check out before we get in the cab is this compartment right here. And this is the top part, gets me down into my transmission area. And what I want to point out is this transmission breather right here. Okay, we always want to look at any of the breathers at any time, make sure once again we're keeping them clean and they're not plugged up. That breather can be cleaned up by just unscrewing off the top, put it in some part solvent, and let it soak for a little bit and then put it back on, or keeping a rag with me where I can put my rag inside there and wipe it off and make sure I'm keeping that clean. And then also removing any debris that possibly builds up in this compartment here, trash-wise. And then this also gives me a good opportunity to be able to look down and see my cab mounts on each side to make sure the bolts are in place, they're tight, and they're not loose. Okay, well, that gets us ready to get inside the cab and fire it up and go to work. Okay, we're started up, machine's ready. After we're good to go, one of the things I do want to point out on this new 836 Next Gen is right down here in the bottom of my screen is what we have, what we call slope indicate. So this gives me main fall and side slope. So this is going to tell me what percentage of slope I'm on, which is very important from the standpoint of building a slope on the working face, running the machine. It's going to tell me a percentage of either side slope or main fall. Okay, walk around inspection's complete. I'm going to reach back, put the hard hat up on the hook over here, so now I can get back and get my nice looking hair back to looking good, and I don't have the hat head going. So I'm going to continue on my daily inspection, and one of the things I want to inspect here inside the cab before we get going is the seat belt. I want to pull the seat belt out, make sure there's no damage to it, make sure the material is good, I don't have any grease on it. But another thing I'm also going to look at is, number one, there's a tag on there that tells me an date, the manufacturer's date, and an install date with the seat belt. There's also a tag here on the housing that tells me when that seat belt was installed. So what we like to say is we need to replace that seat belt 3 years from date of installation. Okay, so I want to make that part of my daily inspection because with the ROPS that's on this machine, the rollover protective structure, if I have an accident, it's going to protect me and not necessarily crush that cab. So it's going to protect me as the operator. So I need that seat belt to do its job as well and hold me in place. So we inspect the seat belt first thing. Make sure I don't have any damage to it. Make sure it's within the installation date as well. But once again, that's 3 years from date of installation. Okay. Another thing, real quick to look at, I have startup shutdown procedures for this machine. And once again, this is the sheet that I can get off of the www.cat.com/safety website. Downloadable for free. Definitely check it out. So now I've went through that. I know what I got to do. I'm going to put that behind the seat. And then also I'm going to pull out from behind the seat. I'm going to pull out the OMM. We're going to have a little story hour now, okay? But we're just going to hold that for, put it right there for a second. But anything I want to know about this machine is inside that book, okay? So now before we get started, I've checked my seat belt. I'm going to go ahead and hook my seat belt up. Okay, we're good there. I'm going to go ahead and lower the arm over here. And now I want to go through and I want to get myself comfortable. I want to adjust the seat properly. You know, I'm going to add, once we turn the machine on, I'll add some air. But I want to get everything feeling good where I'm going to be comfortable operating this machine. Now, next step, I'm going to turn the key on. And I can see my lights flash. I can see everything on the dash flash. Everything went on and off. Now, tells me, hey, the machine's good to operate. I got to wait, let it cycle through all the systems and tell me it's good to go. I'm going to give it a quick honk. Now I'm going to start the machine up. Okay, machine started. We're going to let it warm up. We're going to let it roll through its warm-up process. On average, it's about a 5-minute warm-up cycle. However, if I've got a question on what my warm-up procedure should be, once again, I'm going to pull the OMM out, and I'm going to look it up in the OMM, and it's going to tell me exactly what my warm-up procedure is on the machine. And that's the same with all CAT equipment. And we got our two-way radio going. We're going to just turn that down a little bit for time being. Communication. This is a great time to talk about communication as well, just to kind of reiterate how important it is. Probably the single most important thing that we can do on the landfill, whether it's communicating with other operators, it's communicating with the truck drivers coming in, it's communicating with spotters, everybody. So having the two-way radio, very important for that communication process. Okay, so now I'm in here, I'm going to reach down, I'm going to add a little air to the seat. I'm going to raise it up a little bit. Got it moved forward, got all my adjustments. I'm going to move my mirror so I can see behind me. I look out left and right. My mirrors are adjusted. I can see on each side of the machine and to the rear. So we're looking good. All right, now let's roll through the panel. Up top here, we got my front and rear wipers. We have our climate control center. We have lights. I have stair lights. So I always want to make that part of the daily inspection as well. Make sure my lights are operational. So when I have some changes in the weather and I need the lights, you know, that I know they work before I need them. Let's go ahead and move down below here to this rubber membrane and these round buttons. Okay, a couple things on the buttons. First off, I want to point out this switch right here that has the question mark. This is what we call the WTF button. What's that function? And basically I can hit that button, then I can hit any other button on here that I have a question about, and it tells me exactly what that button is. Okay, so that was the auto blade positioner. But I can use that for any one of the buttons. I can hit that one, tells me throttle lock, enable and disable. And we'll talk a little bit more about throttle lock as we get going. Okay, so I have auto blade and positioner enabled, disabled. I have upper and lower kickouts. We'll roll through those. I have heated mirrors. I have the control the brightness of my monitor. I have throttle lock. There's the lower kickout. And then we have the what's that function button. Over here is our park brake set. Here's our hydraulic lockout switch. Here is my regen switch. If I push it forward, that's going to allow me to do a manual regeneration. If I push it to the bottom, that's going to disable my regen system. No need for me as the operator to have to touch that regen system. It's fully automatic and it should do what it's supposed to do, regenerate and clear the emissions on this machine. However, if I get into a situation where I feel I need to disable that and I'm worried about an environment being combustible, then I can push that button down. I can hold it for about 2 seconds and it's going to give me the light on the dash and it's going to tell me that my regen system is disabled. So when I see that, that's telling me, hey, we've disabled our automatic regen. So I want to make sure that that is set to auto. Now, when I can either push that button down and take that back, and it goes into a regen, as I see in the lower right-hand corner, but it also takes off the regen disabled, okay? Also, if I shut the machine off and turn it back on, it automatically defaults back to automatic mode. Okay, so there's our regen system. Here's our reversing fan. So I can push that down, I can hold that down, and I can do a manual reversing on the fan and blowing debris off the radiator. Okay. Over here is going to be my button for my throttle lock. It's going to be to raise the RPMs. It's going to be to lower the RPMs. Okay, and we'll talk more about that. Over here on my left hand, here's my steering lock. So when that's in place, you'll notice I don't have any steering. When I push it forward, it's going to allow me to do my left-right steer. Okay. Also on my left hand is my forward and reverse switch for my transmission. And then I have upshift and downshift on the transmission. Back over here to my right hand is my blade control. My hydraulics for my blade. Upper and lower. Pull back is up. Push forward is down. Okay, now let's go ahead and just quickly roll through the monitor and talk about some of the features available to us in the monitor. If I hit the top button, touch screen, basically this is just going to roll me through the screen brightness. I can change languages. I can change the units from standard to metric, things of that nature, more personalized for me as the operator. If I go back and then I hit the second button, which shows the wheel loader, that's going to take me into my settings mode. If I hit settings, here I got the top button that says kickouts. I got raise kickout. We have it enabled or disabled. we want to leave it enabled, and we'll talk more about the kickouts as we go through. I've got lower kickout. I can enable and disable it as well. I have controlled throttle shifting. I always want that enabled, because what that allows me to do is if I'm running full RPMs and I hit reverse, that allows that transmission to shift properly, and it's also going to lower RPMs so I don't have any damage to the transmission as I do my fore and aft. It'll actually drop about 300 to 400 RPMs so we don't put all that extra torque on the transmission. Auto idle. The same thing. If I'm running throttle lock and I come to a stop, that's going to allow, and when that's enabled, that's going to allow that machine, if I sit there, it's going to kick it down into an idle after preset settings. So when I go back to it, I hit the delay time. Right now we have it set at 10 seconds. That's the default. So that means if I sit here for 10 seconds, I'm going to drop down to an idle. And then as soon as I make a movement on the machine, it goes right back up to the preset determined RPMs that I had it set at with throttle lock. Okay, we'll go back to that. Parameters. These are just all the different parameters that the machine has by ECM. Now I can go over here to the 1, 2, 3 button. Basically, this is a totals. So this keeps track of lifetime totals. It's got fuel burn, it's got idle fuel, it's got idle time, it's got the odometer reading for the lifetime of the machine. Or I can also have a daily trip. So if I want to reset this, I hit OK. I hit the button with the 2 lines. Goes in. It'll reset my average fuel rate. It'll reset the total amount of fuel, and I can keep track of daily numbers with the trip there. Go out, and then the other important thing I'd point out is if I go into the button that has the wrench or the service mode, and I hit diagnostics and I go into the event list, this is going to give me a list of diagnostics or a list of codes of everything that's come up in this machine. Okay, and it's going to tell me from an operator, you know, like we have action alarm for the armrest. Armrest was raised while the machine was put into gear, but it's going to keep track of everything that's going on with this machine. Okay, and then we go back to our home screen. And we can take us back to our performance screen, okay? And this is also the same screen where I've got my main fall and my slope, side slope indicator on as well. Okay, so that takes us through the monitor, all the buttons, the features that we have in this machine, right? So now the next step is I'm ready to go to work. Or am I? Well, not quite yet. Because also part of my inspection is a monthly inspection, but we're going to say we're doing it today, but I need to check my service brake, I need to check my park brake, and I also need to check my brake accumulator before I go to work, because I need to make sure I have brakes when I'm out on the working face and working around other equipment, working around trucks. So how do I check my brakes? Well, if we don't know, once again, I'm going to pull out the OMM. Right? And I strongly recommend that you spend some time going through the OMM. Anything I want to know about the machine is inside the OMM. But for starters, to look at, I want to talk about the brake checks. So I'm going to go to the back of the book, the index, and I'm going to look, and I'm going to scroll down into the B section. And for starters, it's got a before operation. So it's going to give me a step-by-step as well in here, what's my startup procedure. It's also going to talk about seat belts, brake accumulator check, braking system check. Okay, it tells me it's on page 153. So let's go over here to 153, see what it tells us about the brake check. But anything I want to know about this machine, I can't stress enough the importance to go through the OMM and read the OMM. So a couple of things on this page right here, brake accumulator check. It's got 5 paragraphs. Tells me how to check the brake accumulator. So basically it's telling me I'm going to turn the machine on. I'm going to put it on the on position. I'm going to start it. And when I first turn the key on, you'll notice right here in the screen, I get the brake accumulator light comes on. So once I start the engine, after about 30, 40 seconds, it builds up pressure in the accumulator, and then the light goes off. So I'm going to wait till that light goes off. And once it goes off, then I'm going to shut the engine off. Okay, now we're going to turn it back to the on position. And I can see my brake accumulator light right there. I've got pressure built up now. The light went off. And so now I want to push down on the park or on the service brake on a 1-to-1. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It came on five depressions of the service brake pedal. And I can see the light on in the dash right there. So what's that tell me? If the alert indicator comes on after less than 3 applications of the brake, measure the accumulator precharge pressure. An authorized CAT dealer can measure the nitrogen pressure in the accumulator. Use only dry nitrogen. So it tells me what happens. I should get a minimum of 5 applications for that brake accumulator light to come on. So it came on at 5, so we're good to go. It could come on at 3, but if it does come on at 3, it tells me in there that service brake pedals are required with new disc. Number of applications could be as low as 3 when the lining material on the brake disc is at replacement thickness. So that's another thing I might need to check. So now we're going to go ahead and start the machine back up. So that's the brake accumulator check. Now let's talk about the service brake. So it's telling me with service brake, I want to start the engine, raise the implement slightly, move the transmission control to second speed forward, gradually increase the engine speed to a high idle of 1,000 RPMs for the 836, and the machine shouldn't move. So let's do that. Blades up. I'm going to put my foot on the service brake. I'm going to take the park brake off. I'm forward. I'm second gear forward. And now I'm going to raise. I'm going to raise up. There's 1,100. There's 1,000 RPMs. And it's holding. So our brakes, service brakes are fine. Now let's talk about the park brake. And once again, this is a once-a-month check. But it's important that we roll through this and make sure we all know proper procedures. Now with the parking brake, it gives me, once again, it's going to take me right through it. And what's going to happen, once again, second gear forward. And looks like 1,000 RPMs again, just like with the regular service brake. So park brake is on. We're going to go ahead and put it second gear forward. Now you notice I just put it into gear and I'm still showing neutral. So now what I have to do is take it out of gear, put it back in gear. Now I just engaged in forward, second gear forward. There's 1,000 RPMs, and we're holding. So we just rolled through our brake system check. But like I said, everything I want to know about this machine is right here in this book. Okay? So we went through that. I'm going to go ahead and put the machine back behind the seat where it goes. Want to definitely keep that there to always be able to refer back to if I ever have a question. Now we're ready to go to work. Okay, seat is set, seat belt's on. I'm comfortable, feel good. I've got great visibility. Now let's talk about our upper and lower kickouts with the blade. Let's talk about our auto blade positioner, and let's talk about throttle lock. So for starters, we're ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and hit this button here, and I'm going to enable the auto blade positioner. That's that light right there in the corner. Tells me it's enabled. Now, I'm going to go ahead and raise up. I'm raising my blade. I'm going to hit that top button. You heard the beep. Hold it down for about 2 seconds. I just set my upper kick out, is what that's called. Now I'm going to take it, lower it down. Now I'm at my lower height, and I got to be past that halfway point for it set. I'm going to hit the button with the down arrow or my lower kick out. I heard the beep. It also tells me in the monitor, lower kick out set. So we're enabled. So I'm going to look around, make sure nobody's behind me, nobody's in front of me. And we're going to go ahead, we're going to go forward. Now, when I hit reverse, you notice my blade automatically raised to that upper kick out that I set, and I didn't touch the implement hand. Now, it just automatically lowered. That's our auto blade positioner. No movements for me. It just went in those upper and lower kickouts. Saves me a lot of arm movements throughout the day. Okay, now, at the same time, I still have full control, hydraulic control of that blade when I'm running that upper and lower kickout. It would go back to that set height, and then I've got control of it if I decide to override that. Now, if I don't want to run the automatic kickout or the ABP, I can disable it. Light is off, take it off. But now, if I just want to run the kickouts on their own without it being automatic, I can still hit that detent. I pull back. It goes back to the upper kickout, and then I can just push forward, hit the detent. Let's reset that. There we go. So I come back. There's my detent. And there it just went to the lower kick out. So I can run manually, but I can hit those detents and still run those kickouts. Once again, saves a lot of movement on my arm control throughout the day from back and forth. Okay. The other thing I want to discuss is going to be the left pedal. This is what we call an impeller clutch. And basically this left pedal works in regards to, as I push down on it, if I set throttle lock and I push down on that left pedal, it is reducing my rim pull or my torque to the ground by up to almost 80%. And then when I hit that last 20%, it becomes a brake. So basically I can set my RPMs and I can run all day long using just the left pedal and my left foot and not have to be on or off that throttle all day long. So how I want to set that is I'm going to hit the button over here, and the light comes on the dash right there showing the rabbit chasing the engine. That's my throttle lock. Now I'm going to get on the throttle, and I'm going to take it up to about, let's just say 1950 RPMs. Hit the bottom button, that sets it. Now you can see my RPMs are holding. Now if I want to raise or lower those RPMs without, hitting the brake and disabling it, I can hit the top button, hold it down, and it starts to raise my RPMs very slowly. Or if I want to lower them, I can hit the bottom of the button and it starts to lower my RPMs. So right now we're running about 1950. So we're going to put in gear and take off and go to work. But right now, here we go. We're ready to go. Left pedal. And you can see I'm just pushing down on the left pedal. I'm slowing down. My RPMs drop a little bit. And I'm doing all my speed modulation from my left pedal using that impeller clutch. A lot more comfortable for me as the operator throughout the course of the day when I think about being on and off that throttle all day long. But I can really kick it down to where I'm just creeping along, and then I can let off of it, and away we go. This is going to save me about 10% on fuel burn, but the biggest thing is it's going to be more comfortable for me as the operator. And also, it's going to help control my wheel spin. If I get into a thicker layer, it's going to help control my wheel spin to where I'm not sitting there spinning wheels. So, with that being said, I'm going to lower my implement. I'm going to hit my brake and kill my throttle. I'm going to go ahead and put my park brake on. I'm going to put my hydraulic lockout on. And that's basically everything inside this cab to set up from an operational standpoint. I'm ready to go to work. But some of the other things that I want to think about when I'm out there working on the working face from a safety standpoint, right? Number one, no loose things inside the cab. No loose items. If I have something inside the cab, I want to make sure it's secure, because that way, if I'm in an accident, I don't have to worry about those loose items becoming projectiles inside this machine and worry about them flying around and possibly hit me in the head if I do have an accident. So no loose items in the cab. I want to keep the cab clean. I don't want anything on the floor, water bottles, anything like that. I want the floor free and clean of debris, because some of the things that will happen that water bottle will possibly end up underneath the pedals. And then if I got to hit my brakes, I can't push down and get braking. because I got a water bottle underneath there. So make sure those are secure and off the floor. And then also another thing from a safety perspective, look in reverse before moving in reverse. Sounds simple. However, very easy to do. You know, when I hit reverse and I start moving, but I want to make sure I turn around and I look behind me before I move that machine in reverse. I'll look in my mirrors, I'll look at my rear camera to make sure nothing's behind me, but I still want to turn around and look behind me to make sure nobody's behind me as I'm backing the machine up. Because on average, if I get to the end of my run, I hit reverse and that machine starts to move, it's going to be about 3 to 5 seconds before I can fully see behind me. And so we think about how far that machine can move in that 3 to 5 second period. And it could move far enough that if somebody's behind me, I'm going to run them over. So look in reverse before moving in reverse. Now, we're done. We went through the cab. We talked some safety. Now, it's going to be time to conduct our post-trip inspection, or our end-of-the-day walk-around inspection. And that end-of-the-day walk-around inspection is going to be where I'm going to walk around. I'm going to check for any fluid leaks. I'm also going to get down there and remove any debris from any of the heat sources on the machine. And as we said in our walk-around, about 60% of all fires happen after hours. And that's strictly from debris being on the heat sources of the engine compartment inside the heat sources. Everybody goes home, it sits there and smolders for a little bit, and then later on it becomes an ignition source and we have a fire. So I want to do that post-trip walk-around inspection, clean any of the waste and debris out from this machine, okay? Also, I'd like to add with the walk-around inspection that when we do our walk-around inspections, we have the start of the day, we have end of the day, as we just talked about, and then also we put in there anytime I get on and off the machine. And the reason why that is as I'm sitting here in this machine right now as the operator, I can put somebody down in that articulation area, and they're going to walk roughly about 30 feet before I start to see them. So if somebody's down in that articulation area and I take off, I cannot see them from up here in the cab. So that's why I got to do that quick 360 walk around as well when I come back from whether it's lunch, whether it's taking a break, but quick 360 walk around that machine and ensure nobody's around there or I don't have any fluids leaking. So with that, let's do our post-shift walk around and let's go home for the day.